Welcome to Chatting with You.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Chatting with You. We are on episode 19. Today, we're going to be meeting the newest member of ULF. We have Lizette Gomez with us. She is our newest immigration attorney. Lizette, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Lizette Gomez. I'm an immigrant from Colombia, and I'm the newest attorney, like she said, here at ULF. I just became an attorney in June of 2020, so I'm really, really excited to be able to bring myself to this work.
Awesome. So I heard a little bit of your story and that you went to being an immigrant to an immigration lawyer. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like I don't hear about that often. So how did you do that? Like, what was the process? How did you begin?
Sure. So I immigrated when I was 7 years old from Colombia and grew up undocumented here and really grew up in a community in Marietta of a lot of undocumented people. And when I was around high school, I really started to realize a lot of the barriers that there were for my community, specifically around like going to school or even just like the fear that immigration was going to come out and like take people's families away.
Right.
And I think that's when I made the decision that I wanted to be a lawyer. One of the conversations that I heard the adults saying a lot was like, if we just had access to a lawyer, our lives could be very different, or our families' lives could be very different. And I really took that to heart and wanted to be that person that people could have access to. So I decided I wanted to go to law school. It wasn't an easy path or a straight path.
Yeah.
I did really great in high school and went right into college. But about 2 years in, I had to drop out for like various personal reasons, and partially because I was helping to take care of my sisters. So I was out of college for about 5 or so years. And I worked as a paralegal during that time because, like I said, I always knew that I wanted to be an immigration lawyer. And I worked as a paralegal for a criminal defense firm, which really sparked my interest in criminal law that I had no idea I had any interest in. My boss, his name is Barry Hazen. He was incredibly supportive of me. He really pushed me to go back and finish school and go to law school. He even paid for my law school applications and the LSAT and everything. So I went back to school, I finished, and I went into law school knowing by that time that I wanted to do criminal and immigration.
Gotcha.
But it wasn't a straight path. I think a lot of us have a lot of family responsibilities and financial hurdles to get to school. But I think that as long as you make it in the end, that's what really matters.
Yeah. So when you first came, you came to Georgia. That was the first place you entered?
Well, we flew into Miami because we came on a tourist visa. So we came to see Disney World. So we flew into Miami. We went to Orlando and spent a couple of days there and then drove up to Atlanta. I had an uncle who was already living here who had restaurants, Mexican restaurants here. And so that's where my dad was already working. And that's why we immigrated to Marietta.
Gotcha. What was that like? So when you came here, you were 7, you said. So what was that feeling of coming to the U.S. for the first time? And did you want to go back home, or were you okay with staying?
So when I was 7, I don't think that I understood what immigrating really meant.
Yeah.
Specifically because we already knew that although we came on a visa, we knew that we were not going to be able to go back because we overstayed the visa and became undocumented. Gotcha. So I didn't quite grasp that at the age of 7. And my only real understanding of what the United States was from TV. So like Baywatch and right? Baywatch and Disney. So what I thought was it was a big beach with a lot of blonde people on it. And Disney World was somewhere in there. And so since I first came into Miami and we went directly to the beach, I was like, this is exactly what I thought.
The whole country is like this.
And then we went to Disney World and I thought, I know exactly what I'm getting into. But about a week later, we landed in Marietta And my dad was working out in Hiram, Georgia, which is it's rural now. But it was very rural then in '92.
Gotcha.
And there were no beaches around. So that was quite a shock to know. It was not at all what I expected. And I didn't know English. And, there were far less Hispanics in Marietta and in Hiram than there are now.
Right.
So there was like a lot of just adjusting and coming to terms with where we were.
Right.
And then like a few months down the road, realizing that we were not going to be able to go back and that we may never go back. But it was like by the time I realized that, we were already here. So those like goodbyes that you say to your family, I didn't realize that those were like the last goodbyes for decades. So
Yeah.
I never saw my grandfather again after I left when I was 7. Eventually he died after like we were here undocumented and we couldn't go see him when he got sick.
I'm so sorry.
Some of
to hear
those
that.
goodbyes were like, the last goodbyes.
Right. That's gotta be hard. Have you been back since?
I have now. I became a legal permanent resident in 2011
Nice.
and immediately went
Congrats.
back. Yeah. I don't know. I think that I share this with a lot of people who are undocumented. A lot of times we really strive to become documented so that we can live a safer and more peaceful life here. But
Right.
number one, I think on our minds is so that we can go back to see our families.
Yeah.
So that was the very first thing I did as soon as I got I went back before my green card even came. I got that little stamp on my passport and flew out the next day.
The next day. Wow. So how long? So you came when you were 7. How old were you when you went back for the first time?
20 something.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So like over a decade.
Yeah, I was undocumented for about 20 years.
That's crazy. So as you were growing up here undocumented, what was the first step you guys took to become documented?
So I had uncles and aunts who were already here, and one of them became a citizen a few years after we arrived. So he filed a petition for my dad and by proxy, us, the children.
Right.
So that was the first step. Unfortunately, the first time that my family filed their application, they did it with a notario, so somebody who was not an actual attorney who just said they were going to help them out. Everything was done wrong. All of the applications were done wrong. And my parents didn't realize it until years later when somebody else explained that to them. So they had to refile with an attorney again. No. And so that means, on a sibling petition, the wait time is decades. And that means that we lost our original priority date and the wait time had to start all over. That was our first step to becoming documented. By the time that visa became available, I had aged out. So I was 23, I think, by the time the visa became available. And so I was no longer a minor or a child under that application. So I didn't qualify anymore when my family was able to adjust. Gotcha. So I didn't qualify as a derivative. But by that time, I had been dating the person who is my husband now for over 2 years. And we decided to get married. And so then that's how I eventually became documented. And this is kind of crazy, but because I grew up undocumented, I grew up with this like ingrained fear of immigration and of immigration ever like having any of your information.
I don't blame you.
And I kind of grew up with this idea that they're like always lurking around the corner and they're coming to get you or your family. And so even after I got married and I qualified to apply, that same year, there was a state representative who was married to a Colombian woman, and he had applied for her. And apparently she had some sort of removal order or something, but I didn't really understand that at the time. Mm-hmm. The news just said immigration came in the middle of the night and took the state.
That's all you hear.
Wife
That's
away.
terrifying.
That's all you ever hear. It terrified me. And I thought, well, and he had applied for her, and I thought,
Right.
immigration can come and take away a state representative's wife in the middle of the night. What's going to keep them from taking me away in the middle?
Right.
So I actually didn't send my application in for like 4 years after I got married, because I just had this fear that if I sent them my address, they were going to come at any moment and take me.
I can't imagine that. Yeah, that is very terrifying. So how did you cope with that? What did you do? Did you not put your address on any forms? Like,
I think it just came to a point where the problems with being undocumented became greater than the fear. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I just have to do this. And I went and consulted with an immigration attorney who basically was like, this is really easy and you qualify. I don't understand why you're not doing this.
Right.
And so that was actually the first application I filed. So I filed my own application. And the fear, I think, I still have the copies of the application. And generally, it's a fairly simple and straightforward process. Once I actually did start working in immigration, I realized that those applications are like this big. Yeah. The application that I sent in, because I was so afraid, was like this thick.
Everything, provide more than enough stuff. Yeah. Yes. No reason to reject it.
Yeah. Nobody is ever going to question me. So yeah, I think at some point I just realized I have to just suck it up and send it. And whatever happens, happens.
Right.
And what happened was I got my green card and I was able to go see my grandmother and go back to school, because then I was finally, able to get FAFSA and go back and finish college.
Right. So when you entered college, you entered knowing that you wanted to do immigration law?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what was that like, going to college and learning about everything that you were scared of for so long, you know?
So when I went to college, I studied political science.
Okay.
As a bachelor's. And generally in political science, you're not really learning a lot about immigration. I didn't really learn about immigration law until I went to law school in the second year. And by that time, I already had a couple internships in immigration law. I already had my green card. So I think I had kind of jumped over those hurdles.
Okay.
But when I was in college, there was just this desire to kind of hide in the back so that nobody could figure out that I was undocumented. Because I remember also the year before I started college at my church, which was a Hispanic church that I went to, one of the kids had gotten into college and had started school, and about 2 weeks in, they kicked him out because they realized he was undocumented.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I kind of had this idea, like, I'm here, but I can get kicked out at any moment.
Right. Always on your toes.
Yeah.
That's so scary. When you finally decided to go to law school, you said, so you got into immigration your second year. Is that when you started like your internships and stuff and started getting experience, or did that start first year? So
I knew, I went to Georgia State Law School, and I went because it was right across the street from where I was working. It was really convenient.
Perfect.
It was, yeah. But when I had and because my boss really he wanted me to stay with him. And so he really pushed me to go there. But originally I wanted to go to school in California, where they had immigration clinics and programs, and like a whole track. So I knew going into Georgia State and I love Georgia State, let me just say, Georgia State Law School, best decision I could have made, even if it wasn't my top choice at the beginning. Right. I'm super excited that I went there and really happy. But I did go in knowing that they were not as strong at immigration as I would have liked. And so that I was going to have to go out and find those resources on my own. And immediately, I think at orientation, I met a classmate who was doing immigration law, and I latched onto her, and I asked her, where can I go get an internship? where can I start learning? Because all of my experience at that point had been in criminal law with my boss, who was a criminal attorney. And I actually like had a conversation with him as well. And I said, not only do I need to lower my hours to accommodate for law school, I also need to lower my hours because I want to get immigration experience. And he was, again, super supportive. He let me lower my hours. He let me hire an assistant that would fill in the other hours for me and everything. And so I just called immigration attorneys, and I asked if I could go hang out at their office and do work for them and start learning. So the first year of law school, everybody has to take all of the same classes. You don't get to choose. And you take things like civil procedure and contracts and torts. So you don't really get to choose your classes until your second year. And that's why I wasn't able to get into immigration law until the second year. But in the meantime, I took internships in immigration offices. Literally anybody who would open their door or answer my emails, I was going to show up at their office and do some work and get some learning on. Yeah.
Cool. So your first job at the criminal law firm, what did you do there? Like what kind of criminal law, like as a paralegal, because you said you really enjoyed it, right? Like, so what aspects?
Yeah. Well, my first real job in the legal field was when I was 18 and I first started college, and I worked at a bankruptcy law firm, filing, like literally just putting things in the file room, and kind of worked my way up, worked at different firms. But, after I had quit college, that's when I found myself at this criminal law firm. Gotcha. And once I started working with him, and by that time I kind of had worked my way up to paralegal from like legal assistant and file clerk. Once I started working with him and the way that he works the cases, he really brought me into the case and would walk me through what evidence meant, what lack of evidence meant, how you review evidence, how you take the evidence that they show and then compare it to what the law says, and then say, okay, can they prove their case? And I think that kind of analytical thinking really called to me in criminal law. But also I realized that in criminal law and in immigration, the government is the person that's coming against you, which means the government has this giant apparatus and every resource in the world to come against you. And as attorneys, what you get to do is say, okay, you have to force them to meet their burden, right? If you want to convict my client or if you want to deport my client, then you have to bring all the proof. And if you cannot bring the proof with all of the resources that you have and the entire state apparatus, then you can't put my client in jail. And so becoming that protector of people when the state is coming at them, I think that's what called to me the most, is being able to like hold the state and the prosecutors and the police to standards that they have to.
I love that. I love hearing all this because I'm in the process of applying to law school now.
Oh, yeah.
So everything that you're saying right now, I completely resonate. Like that's the feeling I want. That's what I want to do. So it just feels good to hear someone affirm like, yes, this is what it's like, you know?
Yeah. When I started at criminal, so one of my friends and I from undergrad, we were unemployed at the same time and looking for jobs at the same time. And she's the one who interviewed with my boss first.
Right.
And she didn't end up getting the job, and she also didn't want it because it was criminal. So she referred me to him. And I remember talking to her and we were both saying, I'm not sure if representing criminals is something that I can do with my life, or even like as a paralegal, helping someone to do that. Yeah. But at that moment, I was trying to help take care of my sisters. My 17-year-old sister had moved in with me and I was 21. So I was desperate for a job.
Do what you got to do. Yeah.
And I was like, listen, if he will interview me and offer me the job, I'm taking it, whatever it is. And then, I can figure it out later. So once I got there, I realized that it's not about representing criminals or helping people get away with things. It's about representing people, sometimes who may have done something wrong, but it's about really making sure that the state doesn't railroad people. right? Because I think often we've seen, and particularly like in this moment in history, we see that people who have money can commit crimes, heinous crimes sometimes, and get off on probation.
Yep.
And people who commit low-level offenses like misdemeanor marijuana or DUI find themselves in jail. And there's no reason for it other than the person with money had access to a lawyer and the person without money got railroaded.
Mm-hmm.
And so becoming that person that says, okay, if you're going to offer Mr. Rich Guy 10 hours of community service and my client did the exact same thing, then my client should also get 10 hours of community service. There's no reason for him to serve 30 days in jail.
Right.
And I really, when I was in law school, I was able to work at public defender's offices and really represent indigent people who wouldn't otherwise be represented. And that was, that really fulfilled my heart.
Oh, that's awesome. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that's something that I've recently learned as well. So I'm just I don't know if I should say this. Kevin, if this isn't inappropriate, I don't think it is, but edit it out later. But basically, I was driving in Virginia. I was going downhill. I got a speeding ticket. I'm not proud of it, but I got a speeding ticket. And if it was in Georgia or New York, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But in Virginia, anything above 80 is considered reckless driving. And I think I was going like 83 or 84. So, and the officer didn't tell me anything when he gave me a ticket. He just said, here's a ticket. It's your court date, whatever. I looked at the ticket and it said reckless driving. And I'm like, wait, I thought it was a speeding ticket. So I Googled it and I'm like, criminal offense. Wait, possible jail time. Wait. And I kind of had like that moment of like, oh my God, I need a hire attorney. Like, and I did. And thank God everything worked out. But I was just thinking, like, if someone didn't Google it, or if someone didn't know, someone didn't have the money to hire an attorney because it was not cheap, what would have happened? You know?
Exactly. That's really one of the reasons that I'm really happy to be working at Urbina Law Firm, because we give free consultations.
Yeah.
So when I worked in criminal defense before with my other boss, we also did free consultations. And not everybody does that. When I've worked at other firms through law school or interned, I realized that people charge anywhere between $100 to $400, $500.
And sometimes they can't even help.
Right. Just for the consultation, just to sit there and talk to somebody. And I understand because we're really, really busy and we need to devote our time to our cases. But as somebody who grew up knowing that access to an attorney could have changed my life, I really believe in free consultations, even if it's to say to somebody, you know what, I can't help you now. You're going to have to wait a few years, or I may not ever be able to help you. But at the very least, you had the opportunity to sit down with an attorney who could explain things to you, what your risks are, what you should actually be afraid of and what you shouldn't. Like somebody could have told me, immigration really isn't lurking everywhere and they're not going to come to get you in the middle of the night. Right. So that's one of the reasons I really love being here at this firm, because I think that people really need to have the ability to sit down and maybe somebody could have said in Georgia, you know what, it's just a speeding ticket. Just go pay the fine. You're going to be fine. But in your case, a reckless driving situation on your record could have been a real problem where just calling the prosecutor up and saying, can you bring this down to 79 over, instead of 83, and they'll do that. Yeah. But most people don't know that you can do that.
Exactly. And I think I agree with you, what you're saying with the free consults. Like, so when I first started here, we actually had a training on like how to do a consult, how to talk to clients. And one of the things that we learned here was like, we want them to feel like family, almost all of our clients. Like we want them to feel safe. And sometimes all they need is to sit down in front of an attorney to be like, listen, we're going to figure this out together. Like that's all they need, just to feel like someone has their back. And to do that for free, I feel like, rather than being like, I don't know, paying money and then be like, we're going to figure it out together, or like pay money and then we can't help you. It's like, no matter what happens, we'll give you an honest, evaluation on your case. And that's what people really need sometimes. So
I really feel like it makes a huge difference. It really does.
It definitely does. So I love that your old boss did that too. He sounds like a great person.
He is a great person. I really love him.
Gush about your old boss day.
And I think the other thing that I learned from him that I carry here is that working with him set a really high standard for my bosses. So when I was in law school, I worked at a lot of different places, and I got a chance to see a lot of different types of firms and a lot of different leadership and management styles.
Right.
But everybody I always compared to Barry. And I thought, you know, would I be as comfortable working for this person as I was working with Barry? Yeah. And I think that that's why I picked Urbina Law Firm to be at, because I thought, yeah, this is a place that I will be as comfortable as when I was with Barry. There were a lot of other places that I thought, no, this is not, like, I'm not going to get the same level of comfort. I'm not going to get the same level of support. But here I thought, yeah, this is the place that I'm gonna feel like, I feel like this person, I feel like Michael Urbina can rise to that level of that standard that Barry set.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And to anyone listening, we're not just gushing about our firm because we were told to. We were not. This is genuinely how we feel. It comes up in conversation naturally.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've kind of come full circle now, because you went from being an immigrant, being an immigration attorney, to now being a professor. Yeah. Yeah. So, I really love it. Yeah. So you teach, correct me if I'm wrong, undocumented immigrants, I think? Students? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I am a professor at Freedom University. It is not like an accredited university. It's a nonprofit that offers college level courses to undocumented students. So in, I want to say 08, 09, something like that, the state of Georgia passed the law, or the State Board of Regents passed a policy saying that undocumented people cannot enter the top 5 universities in Georgia.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So they're blocked. And then the other universities, they can attend, but they have to pay out-of-state tuition, which is sometimes double, sometimes triple the tuition that an in-state student would pay, even if you graduated from high school here, even if you've lived here all your life. Right. So when I went to college at Georgia State, the first time around was before this policy. And one, if I had come after the policy, I never would have been able to go to Georgia State, because that policy would have locked me out. And two, I would have had to pay out-of-state tuition, even though I've lived in Georgia since I was 7 years old. I went to Georgia schools. I graduated from a Georgia high school. And so that's when Freedom University started, by volunteer professors from UGA and Emory. They got together and created this nonprofit to kind of fill in that gap. And so what we do is we provide college level courses so that students who do want to pursue their education, they're not just sitting idle. As you know, every semester that you stay out of school makes it harder to catch up when you do go in. So it really helps get their brain going and introduces them to what the college experience will be. And then we also have really wonderful instructors who help them with their college essays and their scholarship applications. And we have partnerships with schools so that after they leave Freedom, they're admitted into colleges on generally full scholarships. And colleges, it used to always be out of state. So we've sent students out to Vermont and Connecticut, states that are more immigrant friendly. Right. And who have scholarships set up for undocumented students. And more recently, we've been able to create partnerships with schools here, private universities here in Georgia, who are accepting and admitting our students. And that gives them the flexibility to stay near their families. Because as we know,
that's so awesome.
Right? Yeah, we as a lot of our students are like the oldest siblings,
The
in
responsibilities that come with that. Yeah.
So they need to be near their family to help out and work and whatnot. And so that's what we do. What I teach, I've taught legal studies, and I've also taught revolutionary Latin American history, which was awesome. And this summer, I just wrapped up a semester for first generation college preparation. So all of the students in that class had already been admitted, had already been granted scholarships, and we prepared them to go into school. We teach them, like, how do you find your classes? Who do you go to when you have a problem with your schedule? How do you budget when you're in school? You know, and then a
life skills that you don't usually get. Even growing up in America, no one taught me these things.
Yeah. But particularly, I think for us and first generation students whose parents didn't go to school, and they need a little bit more help navigating that.
Yeah.
You know, what is it like to live in a dorm? How do you get into the dorms? How do you, we have a whole team that helps them navigate the application process, which I think is also really important, because their parents can't, if their parents never went through it, they can't necessarily help them. I think our parents give as much as they can, but it really helps to have somebody with experience.
Yeah.
So we walk them through all of that and careers. So we have a different guest speaker each week come and talk about their careers. So we had somebody who was formerly undocumented and is now a pediatrician come to speak to them about history. Yeah. We had some friends of mine from law school come and speak about the legal careers. We've had somebody who has several PhDs come and speak about becoming a professor. And so every week we have somebody come and talk to them about different career paths. And we really make an effort to make sure that those people are also immigrants, so that our students see themselves reflected and know that it is possible.
Yeah. So you guys are really creating a community, basically, to make them feel not alone and that they can do it. Essentially, that's awesome.
So, and I really credit the students themselves, because like I said, when I was a student, so when I was in high school, I grew up with this, I don't know if anybody has seen there's a documentary called No Le Digas a Nadie, Don't Tell Anybody. And I grew up with that mentality. No le digas a nadie that we're undocumented. Anybody that you tell can report you to immigration and you're going to get deported. And so I never told anybody. Going through high school, I was in a magnet program, and I had really amazing teachers and really amazing counselors who were pushing us to apply to Ivy Leagues and scholarships and all those things. And I just kind of wrote along sent my applications, and sure. And I was like, I don't qualify for any of these things. And I never told anybody I need a different type of help because I don't qualify. Right. And when I went to college, again, like I said, I really tried to hide in the shadows, in the corners, because I was afraid of somebody finding out. But after I had quit college, I remember this coming out of the shadows movement started, and it started with the students. And I remember the existence of the Georgia Undocumented Youth Alliance happening. And they started holding these coming out of the shadows events at the colleges. I remember there being one at Georgia State after I had already dropped out of Georgia State. And I remember thinking that the amount of bravery that it takes to do that is enormous, because I never spoke about being undocumented until after I had my green card in my hand.
Yeah.
So I really...
Until you officially weren't anymore. Yeah.
So I really credit them, the students, for their bravery and them creating that community and them really pushing the envelope. And then I'm just there to serve, right? I'm there to say, I had the same experience as you, and this is how I navigated it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you see yourself reflected in the students? Because you're basically helping a little young Lizette somewhere, you know?
I tell them a lot that if freedom had been around when I was growing up, I think my life would have been entirely different. So when I applied, again, Georgia State was not my top choice in law school, but it was also not my top choice in undergrad. I'm really happy that was where I ended up. Right. But because I was in a magnet program in high school that was geared towards the Ivy Leagues, that's sort of where I had set my sights. And I got into and got admitted to my dream school. And I was like all geared to go. I was going to go live in the Northeast. I was like, I guess I'm going to buy some very heavy jackets for 4 years. And that summer, a few weeks in after admissions, I got a call from the admissions office saying, hey, like we're ready to register you for classes. You're good to go. The only thing we need is a copy of your green card to enroll you.
Oh, no.
That's what I said. And I said, okay, well, you know, like I said, I had grown up with this idea, like never tell anybody. So I said, listen, I'm going to ask my parents for it and then give you a call back. And then I just shut down. Like I never called anybody again. And I told my dad, I guess I have to register somewhere else because but if an organization like Freedom was around, or this like Georgia Undocumented Youth Alliance organization had been around at that time, then I probably would have had somebody to speak to that could have guided me and said, let's go talk to the admissions office. Let's explain to them the situation and let's figure out some kind of funding or scholarship or other ways of documentation for them to enroll you. But instead, I just got scared and I quit.
That fear. Yeah. Because it's either you tell them and risk in your mind, everybody being sent back to your country and ruining everyone's life, or you just move on and give up on that. Yeah. So yeah, I get that. That's very tough.
So yeah, I think I do look at it as like helping little Lisettes get through this process and not get stuck in the fear that I got stuck in.
Yeah. That's crazy. What else are you doing to help the community? I know you're very, very involved.
I am. I don't know how to sit still. So I volunteer with the Law Lab Asylum Pro Se workshops. And it basically is a group of volunteer lawyers who get together on Saturdays. We're one Saturday a month. And we help people who are unable to hire an attorney to file their asylum applications. We help them file that asylum application on their own and sort of guide them through what that process is. And then I also volunteer with the Southern Center for Human Rights and help to represent people who have been arrested in the recent protests for Black Lives Matter. Right now, I'm not doing any direct representation of protesters, but what I am doing is setting up all of the processes so that the attorneys who are representing them directly can like do it very, very easily by like downloading templates and just filing their forms.
Right. This just blows my mind. You came to this country as an immigrant. And not only did you become a lawyer, not only are you a professor, but now you're doing things like helping people, protesters from the BLM protests and stuff like that. It blows my mind. And last question I want to ask you is how do you deal with, obviously you've been through the process. This is very special to you, very personal. There are a lot of people who just don't get it, who don't understand, who have very different viewpoints and not necessarily, they don't really know the reality of the situation. How would you deal with helping them understand and not getting into a fight?
No. So I really believe that it is important to talk to people. And I think research shows that more than throwing data at people, the one thing that changes people's minds is meeting people who are in that situation. So often you hear a lot of people saying, I thought this and this and this about immigration until I found out that my best friend was an immigrant, or my best friend was undocumented, or the guy who owns the Mexican restaurant that I go to every week was undocumented and was having issues. And so I really believe that it's about like one-on-one sharing with people. And for me personally, like there have been those moments where I've been that person in this moment in my life, like I just don't have the emotional energy to do that. I'd much rather devote my emotional energy to my clients.
Yeah.
And getting them out. And I think that I have a lot of friends who have taken that sort of thing on.
Right.
And I always tell them like, yeah, absolutely. Share your story. That's your thing. Go do that.
Right.
And let people know. So for me, it's more about dedicating my time to doing the very best that I can for my clients. Gotcha. And not so much about changing hearts and minds anymore. Mm-hmm. Because I think that those are like very, very slow one-on-one processes.
Yeah, they take time for sure. Mm-hmm. Multiple conversations. Well, I think I'm just thinking of 7-year-old Lizette right now. I don't think she could even imagine that this is where you would be at this point in your life doing what you're doing.
Not at all. During law school, I did a lot of internships and I did a lot of volunteer work, just trying to get to this point. And it took a long time to get to this point, having to have taken a big break from college, getting through law school, which usually is a 3-year process for more people, most people who go full time. For me, it was 4.5 because I went part time so that I could still work and do internships and whatnot. Yeah. And so often these past 2 months that I've been a real lawyer, I text my friends who I went to law school with, and I say, I can't believe that this is my life now. Yeah. And it's really, really exciting to be on this side. And, my favorite quote is from Constance Baker Motley. And she said she helped fight. She's a Black lawyer who helped litigate and get colleges in Georgia desegregated. Right. That's amazing. And and so my favorite quote from her is, I can't think of no one better to fight for me than myself. Yes. And that's what I think about, like being an immigrant and becoming an immigration lawyer. I can think of nobody better to fight for my community than those of us who have been through it.
Yeah. Be a voice for yourself. Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. Well, Lizette, thank you so much for coming on this episode and sharing your story. I think you're doing incredible things. I know you're new to this firm, but I'm so excited to see, like you said, you never stop moving. So I'm really excited to see what other things you do. And I think you're very inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me, Papiya. It was wonderful talking with you.
I know. If you don't know, Lizette and I don't really interact at work a lot right now. So I really was getting to know her for the first time through this conversation.
I know. With the pandemic, it's so difficult to find moments where we can be in the same room together. So this is really great.
Yeah, it really was. Well, I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Plug. And thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.